Alrighty, before we get started, we put on the website, we put on the consultation form where we start recording training sessions and sessions and consultations.
Okay.
So we have Rita here, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Alrighty, and then so you can, nervous obviously with the label there, but then I saw she's kind of fearful of people and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Fill me in on Miss Rita here.
Yeah. So I think she's definitely always very suspicious of people. I think she seems to always like when she's around us, I feel like she's always guarding us.
Okay.
And I think anybody that comes into the house, it's just like a threat, and so she will bark, and she will at times charge them, and she's nipped people in the past. No blood or anything, or even like anything painful, but she's gone up and
it's usually when their backs are turned to her, and she's just kind of like, I guess, letting them know, like, hey, go home or something, right? So we got her, to give you some backstory, we got her, she was from a rescue litter from Mexico that we just moved here from San Francisco, and there was like the rescue place that we were working with had rescued a litter of 9 puppies from Mexico that we actually stayed in contact with most of the other dogs, and they were all fine. She just kind of, so I don't think anything traumatic happened we got her when she was like 12 weeks old, and from the very beginning she was just kind of always really anxious, and we've gotten trainers, and the trainers basically told us like, well, this is why you never get a puppy, and like we were already invested in her, and we're not gonna give her back, right? So it's been a journey with her. We've learned like we've managed the process. She currently takes paroxetine every single morning. We saw a vet behaviorist, and which I know you're probably not approving of, but like no one was giving us any other guidance, right? So we went through a process of seeing this vet behaviorist, and we tried fluoxetine and probably something else, and then eventually paroxetine kind of helped her calm down a little bit, but she's still like, she's always been like highly, on edge and nervous. And
yeah, so like, and then I think we have a dog walker that grew up with her basically when we got her, and so she would walk with her, loves her like us, and she would go with the other dogs, and usually when she's with her and she meets other people, she's actually better. She's a little bit more open to
not as protective,
and particularly with like a pack. And we've introduced another dog walker as well that was her friend over time, and so even friends eventually over time, who had other dogs, one other friend was able to like win her trust to a certain extent, and but it's been it's like anybody new. It's just a challenge, like what
so she's so sweet with us, and we know she's a really sweet dog. She's just like so scared of like not the entire outside world, but she's just afraid that any other human that comes along is going to like, I don't know if it's like ruin her, like what we're providing her or whatever. She's clearly nervous about other humans.
So we exercise her every day. We'll go to a park when there's nobody there. She's ball obsessive. She can, if there's a ball there, she'll fetch it. She loves fetch, and so I can redirect her with the ball. If we're walking down a hallway and there's no dog coming, I can pull it out and she'll just keep her eye on the ball, or I can walk ahead fast if I feel there's going to be an uncomfortable interaction with another dog or another person. I can kind of just keep her going. So I think she gets exercise, and she can. And we can do that with the ball, and she's also pretty good with retreats and stuff, but I think with other people and also new dogs too, like it can also be she can be aggressive towards them.
We are committed to this dog. There's no like question of that, but we just moved here. We just got a new house. It's an actual house with a backyard, which she didn't have before we were in a condo. But we're trying to find, we understand that she's never gonna be the dog that runs up and is okay with like a lot of people around, but we also wanna make sure that, you know, if we can have people over, we can set her up that she's okay. She doesn't have to greet everyone, but she's not freaking out because there's other people in the house. I mean, there's just gonna be, with cleaners or whoever, there's gonna be other people that have to, people fixing stuff that come into the house, and yeah, if there's anything we can do to like help her with this process.
Okay. Anything else?
I think, so something else to note is she's, like I said, she's nipped
Yep.
my dad, my sister, and my brother on his hand, and then another friend of ours on the back of the leg. So 3 people on the back of their legs, and my brother on his.
All within the home.
All within the home, yeah.
Okay.
Super guarding of the home.
Or are they like leaving the room? Are they walking past her?
Leaving the room, or actually, so last Saturday, it was just my dad and I standing in front of the fridge, and she was on the leash with Mike.
I didn't have it taught.
Yeah, and so my dad wasn't even moving, but I think she's super protective. Between the two of us, she's super protective of me, and I think maybe because I was next to my dad, and you know, my dad, she doesn't see him very often, so I don't know, she was freaked out with that.
Every nip that she's done was always kind of like she went up pretty slowly and just went and like that and then backed off, versus kind of like someone coming in really quick and coming back and off.
And there was, like, my dad had no marks, neither did my sister, neither did our friend that she did that too. So it's just more of like, I want you to know, I want you to leave or whatever. Like,
How old was she when she was attacked? She was attacked when she was a puppy with her dog walker, and stitches pretty deep. She recovered fine, but it was also right around the time when she was a puppy with us.
She was 10 months old, and so she was at a park, and our dog walker was rubbing her belly, and another dog came up and attacked this part and this part of like her legs. It was pretty major. She recovered. She was fine, but it was not a.
So is she dog social or no?
So she is without us. Like with her dog walker, she does great. She loves other dogs. When she's with us, there's some dogs she's okay with, but most dogs
she knows pretty well. Even with the dogs that she knows really well, she can get a little jealous with them, but it's still, even then, she ends up just playing with them, and she eventually she's fine with them.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think we're probably forgetting some things, but I think that you get the gist.
Those are the major ones, I think. Yeah.
Sure. If someone is in your home and she's calm, if they jump up randomly,
That can cause a stir. Yeah.
She'll go after it, yeah.
So my mom got up from out of her chair the other day.
Yeah.
We were just home, and she was just like all of a sudden, and she was keeping her eyes on everybody.
And she started.
And she's on the leash too. She was, I wouldn't trust her, so I was just.
Yeah. Okay. So that's definitely a nervous dog trigger, because fear, anxiety, and nervousness look similar, because they're insecure behaviors. Anxiety tends to not settle. They move around a lot. Lay down, get up, move around a lot. Lay down, get up, move around.
Yes.
They're panting, salivating. Their eyes are dilated. Their eyes are really big. So that's anxiety. Fear tends not to let things go. So like the dog will stay back and just bark the entire time. You know, they don't really ever settle, but they don't also confront unless the person moves back. Then they'll kind of charge in. But then as soon as the person comes in, they'll move back, but they'll keep barking. So if you put them in a different room, chances are they're just keep barking in a different room. Nervous dogs will settle, but then they trigger when there's a sudden change in energy or a sudden abrupt change, like when I asked.
Exactly.
Because I'm trying to determine where her issue is coming from. Because I see that says nervous, but you know sometimes you don't always read things correctly. But that's definitely a nervous trigger. Okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to like puppies and dogs and stuff, like you can get an adult dog, you know, who's seemingly stable, and then they end up with issues. So whoever said like, oh, that's why you don't get a puppy, like that doesn't mean anything. Plenty of people get puppies and they're perfectly fine.
This woman like took off with a bunch of our money too. Like she.
Oh, is this the one I read that ghosted you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no guarantees when it comes to animals. I get clients that do everything by the book. Go get a responsible breeder, pick a good puppy, do all the correct things, read all the books, and then a dog attacks him at the dog park, and all of a sudden the dog flips. Now the dog is dog aggressive. You know, so they did everything for, you know, the nature versus nurture thing, but the nature came in and said, like, yeah, we're gonna fuck this up.
Yeah.
Bite the dog, and then that just kind of undoes everything they did. Or I get people that do everything completely wrong, but the dog is perfectly fine. You know, so there's no guarantees and things. It is what it is, and it's whether or not you have the right tools and approach and the kind of methodology that really makes a difference. So here, so the whole like her being more social with your dog walker and stuff is because you give her something to protect. You're her family, right? So you empower her, so that's why she's more defensive with you than she would be with the dog walker. Plus, if she's with other dogs, the dog walker, it puts her into a social state because she's with other dogs. So like I've had clients that'll say like, oh, my dog is shy of people, but if someone walks up and they have a dog, my dog will open up to that person. And they always wonder why, and like because the other dog puts them in a social state, like they're kind of overwhelmed with I love dogs, that they don't really see that person as threatening. Okay.
Sure.
But whereas if they're approached by a person with no dog, they're going to be apprehensive because they don't have that kind of bridge, if you will, right? So her being with other dogs kind of just puts her in a social state that she doesn't. This is just theoretically. She's not perceiving threat, but also her dog walker isn't her 24/7 like you are, okay? And then in terms of like introducing new dog walkers and them gradually earning her trust, it's because it's kind of like a patterned behavior, like like so-and-so comes over Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and it's consistent and it's repetitive, and she goes out and there's other dogs, again, that's just social space. That it allows her to open up because it's a consistent thing, as opposed to if you had like a kind of like a revolving door of dog walkers, chances are it wouldn't be the same because it's constantly changing, right? So when it comes to people coming into the home, and she could have seen them 100 times or whatever, I'm assuming they knock, ring the doorbell, right? And I'm assuming she barks.
Anybody that comes to the door, we have to do a fake knock. She'll do a bark.
Okay.
And once she knows or sniffs or can tell, and even if she actually hears them coming and kind of figures out who it is, then she won't even do that. She kind of knows who it is. If she's startled by the first knock, she'll bark.
Mm-hmm. In her bubble of trusted people, how many are there?
4, maybe 5, 4.5.
Yeah, and we've had people at open dog kennel boarding places that she gravitates to and loves, and so like we could count those people as well, like right?
Let's say people that come into the home.
Okay, 4.5.
4.5. Yeah.
So I say 4.5 because we have a friend who over years Rita has finally warmed up to, because it was another dog that was walked by the dog walker. It was that dog's mom. But if anything, if she makes,
sometimes
if
when
this
she
woman makes any stuff,
sometimes she'll make a quick move and she'll bark and she'll react to her as well, and then eventually she'll settle, and then she's fine. I think it's
just everyone is definitely on edge though when.
So I guess you're right. I think there's a 4.5.
Two dog walkers,
Two dog walkers.
And then the owner of one particular dog.
And those 2 dog walkers are friends, and they've been together. They're not. That took some time, a couple of years.
To get the second dog walker.
To get the second dog walker climatized with her to get climatized with him, and then to the point where he was actually picking her up by herself.
Yeah. So the first dog walker, because you've had that one since she was a pup. Is not uncommon where puppies, so 6 months in a year are pivotal psychological shifts, where I'll get clients where like anybody or any dog they met under 6 months, they're great with. Anybody after that 6 months, they're suspicious of. Or some might be there's a traumatic incident, and then every dog or every person before that incident is cool, but everybody after that incident is now untrusted, right?
Yeah.
Super common, and it's because of that psychological shift. So 6 months is like terrible two's brain, teenager body. Year is teenager brain, adult body. 2 years is adult brain, adult body. Okay, so that's why 6 months to a year, dogs are kind of tall and lanky, but they're they're skinny and stuff. And then at a year, they start to fill out and get their adult body, kind of like with humans. So all this stuff is pretty standard. Okay, in terms of like the personality type that you have. And then just from experience of like dealing with nervous, fearful, anxious dogs, whatever her dog said, her it was genetics. Because at 12 weeks, you said you could tell that she was that kind of dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just genetics. That's not like abuse or anything like that. Which is like the most common thing people usually gravitate to is when they get a dog with issues. Almost always, people are like, "Oh, this dog was abused."
She was definitely from like a street dog that had other puppies and whatever. Like she's.
Well, we brought her up early, and maybe that was our fault, but she would curl up and she'd let people come
She'd shut
up
down.
to her, and I think ultimately she was just kind of conking out, and maybe that was her just shutting down at a very early state, and we were trying to like just take her out and get her socialized, I think, in public, but and she was fine. She was totally fine, but I think she would also just kind of conk out, and we couldn't tell if she was just shutting down or if she was just getting bored and tired.
The shutdown is typically resistance to move. Like you're trying to walk with her, and like let's say you walk into a space where there's like a bunch of people, is you get resistance and then like just like a melt. Yeah. So it sounds like she may have just been tired or something.
Yeah.
Because shutdown, it's obvious.
Okay.
Like you're like, oh yeah, this dog is under stress. Like they want nothing to do with the situation right now. You know. So when it comes to this stuff, I'm assuming you guys did research on me and how I trained my approach and stuff.
Yeah.
So I use e-collar and pound collar and everything. So I'm gonna have to test her threshold to kind of see what she's about. So what we'll do here real quick is I'm gonna just have you pull her out. You're gonna position her next to you. You're gonna shorten her leash. I'm gonna grab my bite sleeve real quick, and I'm just gonna come in and make contact with her. Okay? Expect her to freak out. She might jump back. She might become a little bit defensive and aggressive, snap at the sleeve or whatever. She might express her anal glands, or she might even piddle. All that's normal. Okay? So I'm gonna go get my sleeve, and then you'll go and just get positioned here.
Hey, it's okay.
So go ahead and step back against the wall. Yep. And you gotta shorten your leash. Hold on it, okay? Take a step back. All the way back to the wall. There we go.
So like going to the vet was a challenge.
Sure.
Like it got worse over time to the point where we really couldn't do anything at the vet anymore.
So you can see the discomfort here. I'm pretty sure she expressed her anal glands, which is just all stress response. There's lip licking. So when I go here by the end, you can see just all the low tension right there, right? And of course, just the unresolved. There we go. Good. Good. Okay. So I'm going to take a step back. Expect her to charge forward a little bit. There we go. Let's see if she lets it go. You'll just restrain her, and I'll have a seat. We'll bring her back, and then she'll settle down. Okay? Good. All right, so I'll explain why I did that.
Okay.
She shakes it off. So,
We've never done that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had her in that kind of
Situation.
dynamic.
yeah. So, the reason why we do that is, and you don't want to pet her,
Oh.
because you're telling her it's okay to be scared. Okay? So here,
And I think we've over-affectionated her. I think growing up is another.
most people do, especially when they get dogs that have issues, because you feel bad or you want to console,
Yeah.
is we tend to turn to touch, right? So here you see how she's panting. That's venting stress, because what just happened was stressful.
Sure.
When I put pressure on her, and pressure means physical touch, is I'm doing the worst thing imaginable to her. So in her brain, she can't help but perceive threat, that she's heightened, okay? So that's why but she's coming from a nervous place, so if somebody moves or anything, she triggers. So when I got up and left, she was fine. When I came back over here, bark, bark, bark.
Sure.
The nervous trigger, right? We come in, I had to go against the wall because we're trying to limit flight response. So we have 4 responses to things: fight, flight, avoidance, submission, okay? So by having her leash, we're removing flight response. We're also removing avoidance because we're against the wall. There's not much where she can go. So that leaves fight and or submission, okay? She got a little bit defensive, which is the snapping you saw. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was like 0.5 on the Richter scale, okay?
Oh.
So super low. The reason why I do this is because I have to see, what are you about? She could be bluffing, there could be a lot of intent, or it could be that, like, hey, I'm non-threatening, get away, I don't want to hurt you, I don't want you to hurt me, right? So that allows me to evaluate what I'm dealing with. So here, we have like what I would call a mediocre level of nervousness and a low level of aggression. I get some dogs who can have low level nervousness but high level aggression, high level of nervousness, high level of aggression, high level of nervousness, low level of aggression, like all sorts of kind of dynamics and kind of components to it, right? It's like a graph, you know, they're up here with certain things and they're down here with other things. So when I put pressure on her, her brain can't help but perceive threat, so that's why I have to write it out. Because if I start that exercise and she gets, you know, edgy, and I go, oh, I'm sorry, and I step back, she's just learned, well, if I do this, I will get my way. So this allows me to stay in the personal space and keep that pressure on until eventually she just sat there and took it. And I was like, all right, and I just stayed there so she doesn't think that her behavior got me to move away. And I stepped away when she relaxed, okay? And then she goes, oh, okay, if I relax with Jessie, pressure goes away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yep.
So when it comes to working with a dog like this, this is where physicality and discipline come into play, but not in a way that people would typically think. Okay, so when we do e-collar, prong collar, people usually think it's a lot of like beaming the dog and permission dog and stuff, and it's really not that at all. The first thing we would do here is behavior and obedience are different, and I'm going to explain it as best I can because it makes sense and it doesn't make sense, okay? Obedience and behavior are 2 different things. Obedience is like education, behavior is like morality, okay? Sit, stay, come, mathing with science, don't jump, don't bark, don't bite, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, okay? So they don't really correlate. A very smart dog, you know, thousands of tricks, terrible, reactive, whatever, aggressive. And then we have the equivalent would be like a very smart person who's not a good person, or a person who's a very good person but not a smart person, right? So here, this is definitely like a behavior stuff, but in my opinion, it's like minor behavior, okay? So there's definitely nervousness there.
Oh, that's so great to hear.
I see this stuff like all the time.
I'm sure.
Okay, so here, because when I went into her personal space, she wants no conflict. Okay, she's trying to stay away. And even when I kept pressure on her, she was just like, and then that was it. And then she let it go. And then I was touching her back. You saw her back kind of tensing up. And then I took off pressure. And when I went for the face, that's where she gave another explosion. Because I'm going right for that mouth, right? So that's where she's going to be at the toughest. And then once I stay there, she's like, all right, well, this didn't work. And she just kind of sit there and like, all right, well, this is what it is, right? And then I took off pressure when she relaxed, and then she's relaxed and we're good again, okay? The first thing we do is we teach to heel, okay, which is obedience. So earlier I was like, well, obedience doesn't really affect behavior, okay? Depending on how you teach the obedience. We tend to teach stuff with food. That's like the most common and approved way of training. Sit, good girl, right, treat, all that stuff. Here we do it through discipline, okay, which is consequence physicality. But people, when they think of e-collar or prong collar, they're thinking of punishment-based training, okay? So punishment-based training, because it's all about how you layer it. If I say sit to Rita and she doesn't sit, yeah, okay? It's coming in as a punisher. If I say sit and you don't do it, this happens, okay? What we do is we layer in remote over everything, and we shape everything using what's called pressure work. Have you ever pulled up and pushed down on Rita to make her sit?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pressure. You're using leash and physical pressure by pulling up and pushing down to make her sit, right? And as soon as she sits, you relax that tension. You remove pressure. So pressure on when you need her to do something, pressure off when she complies. It's the same thing with the remote, okay? So what I do is every time I shape the sit, even if the dog knows sit, Okay, so like I just worked with a dog earlier today. He's a daycare dog. He did a board train at another facility, and then they came to me for e-collar training. He's already been trained on a prong collar. So I'm having to retrain things using the e-collar because I know the place they train them at. They use punishment-based training. They teach the behavior, and then later on they put on the prong collar. If the dog doesn't do it, they correct the dog. Okay? Whereas I use pressure to shape everything. Okay? So here we're reteaching him what things mean because he's been conditioned a completely different way. Okay? So even if I had a dog that was food trained or a dog that was previously trained by another trainer with an e-collar or another prong collar, I almost always have to reteach because most people tend to approach via punishment-based training. Okay? So here, what I would do is we would find a number that is concerning to Rita. Okay, so we have connection, perception, and working levels. And I sent a video that explains all this stuff. Working level is concerning to the dog to the point where they're like, hey, I don't like this, I want this to turn off. Okay, and the reason why that's important is because it's what makes everything functional. Okay, so if a person gets their dog, like the dog earlier, he was already trained, but when they walk him, he still pulls them all over the place because they're not able to override the environment because of the tool they have. Okay, it's just the limitation of the tool. So on e-collar, because our tool goes 0 to 127 in increments of 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 127, is I can fine tune it to the dog. Okay, so his number was 60. Okay, we started at 60, and then once we started to get him under control and focus, all of a sudden we dropped down to 45 because he was being more receptive. But we had a tool that was able to break through everything that was going on in here. Because it's not strength-based, it's not skill-based, it's literally just press a button, a contraction happens, and we pick a number that's appropriate to the dog. Okay? So dogs are physical animals. The way they toughen each other up is by physicality, nipping and biting. But when people get puppies, we tend not to use physicality to correct our puppies. We tend to do kennel time, we tend to do redirect to a toy, we tend to do ignoring and turning our back to them or leaving the room. Those are not things that dogs do to each other. If a puppy is acting a fool to another dog, they simply nip or bite that puppy and go, you're not going to do that, right? So if you see, if we have a really good experienced mother and she has a litter and there's an insecure dog or puppy in that litter, you'll see them go and nip at them and peck at them and like kind of jostle them around and they're screwing with them. And you hear the puppy like yipping and yelping and everybody goes, oh my God, she's being so mean. I'm like, no, she's actually toughening up the puppy. Because she recognizes this is a weak puppy, right? Yeah. But we don't do that. So what happens is when we get that insecure type dog and it doesn't get appropriate physicality, it stays weak, okay, and insecure. So here, the e-collar is a means of physicality, but it's non-confrontational. She doesn't know where it's coming from, okay? So if you do physicality the wrong way, yes, you can create more problems. But usually what people tend to do is when they correct their dog, they attach emotion. They shout, they scream, they're frustrated, they're angry, right? There's just like there's energy involved because they ignore the dog, hoping the dog changes, and then the dog doesn't, and then they get frustrated, so then this energy gets involved in the correction. That's actually the problem. Okay, it's not the correction, it's the fact that we brought energy into the correction. Okay? So e-collar, super non-confrontational, she doesn't know where it's coming from, and it's physicality appropriate to her, okay? So when we teach to heel, it allows us to introduce physicality, it allows us to introduce the concept of pressure, it allows us to teach her how to have impulse control. So part of this reaction is impulse control. She gets stressed, and then she hits like a breaking point, and she's gotta do this lunge, right? That's impulsive to her. Her brain can't help that trigger. It's literally something happens, I respond. So when you teach a dog how to shut off using pressure, they're less likely to trigger, okay? It pacifies the brain, and it's hard to for people to kind of imagine this until they actually see it in effect, okay? So even though obedience, so it's not the obedience that I care about, it's the discipline, it's the physicality, it's the e-collar nipping and biting her that I care about, okay? And it's toughening her up. E-collar is a stressor, okay? Life to her, there's gonna be stressors, okay? So what we're doing is we're exposing her to a controlled stressor that turns on and turns off depending on what she does. So she learns how to control it. And it also is exposing her to a controlled stressor that does turn off, and it helps build confidence. Okay, so when I was going back earlier about the physicality with like the mother for the puppy, right, is they keep screwing with the puppy, and as soon as they get what they want from the puppy, they leave the puppy alone. So the puppy goes, oh, if I just like accept this and I don't put up a fight, it goes away faster. It's similar with the e-collar, okay? So we always start with the heel because leash pulling, if there is any leash pulling, is a part of agitation and frustration, and it makes behaviors worse. It causes a lot of tension for dogs, and we want her to be able to just walk at your hip no matter what's going on, people, dogs, sirens. Let's say she doesn't like busy streets, like all that stuff we want to expose her to. But if a dog is getting flighty and you're walking with them and they stay flighty, they're not going to get better because nothing is getting them over the flightiness. They have to learn to focus and keep the flightiness in check and then go through the stressor. But then once they overcome it, they're like, oh, I was able to walk in that context and not be all spooky and nothing happened to me. Okay?
So I just wanted to, a couple of things. So she surprisingly, she's pretty good about, I mean, she doesn't stay at, she constantly wants to like drag us like, she's a sled dog.
Yeah, she wants to always go play ball and she wants to run.
But she doesn't trigger for things. The most I've seen her like scared of noises was the L. I mean, that's super loud. It made me jump. So I'm not surprised it made her.
Fireworks and stuff and like loud trucks and stuff. She's actually been pretty good. She's pretty resilient to that.
The one question I have with you is, throughout all of this, like, should we continue to give her, what should we be doing, assuming we move forward with the e-collar? What about the paroxetine she's on? Like,
oh, so in my opinion, it does nothing. Like, I know you said it calms her down a bit.
So we've just noticed, like, if we don't give it to her, you know, her hackles, if we go to the dog park or something, her hackles are like through the roof and they're up constantly. But if we give it to her, they're up maybe 30% of the time, right? So whatever.
It's tough to say, but yeah, sometimes it is, sometimes it
feels like
a bad day, I can't tell.
So that's personal preference. I have a dog right now, Doug, who came from veterinary behaviors and a behaviorist and loads of other trainers. He was on 3 types of drugs: gabapentin, fluoxetine, and triazidone.
Oh, that was the other that she tried, gabapentin.
Yeah. And it was just ridiculous. And I guess they took the dog off of 2 of them. They kept them on 1 because they felt it helped. No one wanted to take care of her dog because he was just crazy. She did her consults. He was crazy. I helped him calm them down so we could have a conversation because he would otherwise always be barking. We had the first class. It was 1 week later. We had the second class, and she came in and she's like, Jesse, I have to take him to the vet for shots. And it's the first time in 3 years they didn't have to sedate him. She was actually able to calm him down.
That's exactly what we do. We get her sedated to get her vaccines, to get like whatever.
I think what we experienced there was kind of like how I tried to take her to the vet and like have her get a shot or something. I'd have to sometimes put a towel over her head and just kind of keep her so that they would come in from the rear.
I mean, you almost had to get stitches one time. Right?
She like jerked really high and caught me in the mouth.
And
I bit myself, so it was like, yeah.
So, and Doug's video's on my YouTube if you want to watch and see for yourself. He's an extreme case. Okay, so then you'll look at Doug and you're like, oh wow, this is easy. But and we literally just did 1 class. And then she's like, this is the first time in 3 years we didn't have to sedate him. It's the very beginning of the second lesson. You hear her say this stuff. She's like, Jesse, this is incredible. So the first class, he tried to attack me several times. The second class, I was able to get close to him before he actually started the attack. The third class, I pushed him even more like I did here. And it was like 2 minutes of him trying to attack me before he finally backed off. And then we had our 4th class because they were out of town just on Friday. And then finally I was able to get next to him and pet him. And he had a couple of outbursts. So when he went crazy for 2 minutes, we were maxed out 127. It's the highest hard collar before he backed off.
Oh my God.
Okay, because he was so just lost in the aggression. And at the end of the 4th lesson, we were at 25.
Wow.
So the way it works is when the brain goes into agitation, we're trying to override your discomfort, okay? And we gradually go up, because I'm trying to find, if I can get it at 80, I'll get it at 80, right? Like we go, that's what we do. We don't always come in at 127. We start low, and we just keep going up, because if it's not working, there's no point in staying there. So eventually at 127, he backed off, but it took up 2 minutes, which is keeping it on. And you finally see him back off, because the brain at some point has to give in. Okay, so then as soon as he learned how to back off, he also learned there's another option.
Yeah.
Because he was stuck in fight or flight, right? So he kept choosing fight, and I'm trying to teach him, hey buddy, you don't always have to fight. You can also back away. There's also another option. So once we overrode the kind of hardest part, which is always the initial, when we came back the following week, we started at 70 because my assumption was we're probably going to be up there, okay? But then 70 was too high, so then we went down to 45. 45 was too high, so then we went down to like 15. And from 15, we worked our way up to 25, and it was like the perfect number to get them to back off.
How do you know when it's too high?
The dog's reaction.
Yeah.
So like the first half she did on the 70, like he jumped and yipped. Okay, so I go, okay, too high, 45, right? So we go down drastically. That was still too high, so I go 15. And then it was too low, and then 20, 25. So we're really fine tuning it. And when you watch it, it makes more sense, okay? But for dogs, we can't communicate to them like, hey, it's okay, you can chill, you know? We can't do that. Dogs communicate through physicality. So the e-collar, again, allows us to use physicality without being aggressive, without being forceful, without being mean. I'm completely neutral, the owner's completely neutral. It's just the dog that's losing their shit, you know? So there's a method to it. And what we're doing is, when she goes into the state of panic or franticness, whatever, and we kick in with the collar, we're nipping at her saying, like, chill. So it's like in the movies when somebody panics, someone just slaps them, right? They're like, knock it out, right? The same thing with dogs, but we're fine-tuning it because we're not trying to be over the top where it's too much power that it causes more of a problem, right? So we always start low, work our way up. And in some cases, I'll do reverse and start high and work my way back down like with Doug, because my assumption was this is going to be another, you know, I wasn't expecting him since the 127.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting him to be sensitive to 25, but right there I was like, oh wow. So we just kept going down. So here, what we do is, in order to get her over the touch stuff, we have to do touch, but then we have to correct her, even though she's not doing anything bad, right? She's just nervous. She's saying, hey, back off. We're trying to teach her how to be in a passive state and accept the touch and go, oh, I'm not the one causing the problem. You're not the one causing the problem. My behavior is causing the problem, right? If I try to nip you, if I bark at you, if I freak out, this goes off. But if I'm just chill, nothing happens, and you're not hurting me. That's how we counter condition, okay? So like food you can use to create, it's counter conditioning as well. It's trying to change the emotional response to a stressor, right? But like, if you don't like spiders, you just don't like spiders. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can get all the positive in the world, like, I'm not gonna like that spider, right? But here with physicality with dogs, what we're teaching is acceptance. And then once we get acceptance, it's not like you said earlier, that she should just start going up to people. But once she gets acceptance of like, okay, people aren't trying to hurt me, we're more likely to see her come up and come out of her shell and want to open up to people because she's gotten over that kind of that thought of potential threat.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then there's the other half of it, right? So I get her over this. Once she's over that, if your goal is to get her to open up to your family and kind of open up to them and not be suspicious of them, we do that first. Once I get her to a point where I go, okay, we're ready now to introduce other people, it's a very controlled exercise, okay? My recommendation always with dogs that have nipped people or are nippy is muzzle condition, okay? Because if you have like a relative that's been nipped by her, and you're like, hey, we're working to train her, and she's doing great, she's making progress, will you pet her? And they'll be like, this dog bit me before, right? They're gonna be apprehensive of it. The muzzle helps them feel safe.
Sure.
The muzzle also takes off the anxiety of in case something happens, right? Because when people see something, they tend to stop and disengage. But that actually reinforces her behavior. So if she does a bite, that's why I use this. I didn't come in with my bare fist. I said, I'm going to use this because I'm expecting she might do something, but I know if she bites this, I don't need to back off. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then once we get to a point, it's like, okay, cool, now she's opening up. We don't feel like we need this anymore. And then you start to remove.
Would you help us get a muzzle that, this sounds probably like a ridiculous question, but like, we haven't been able to, we've tried the muzzle before. Every muzzle she's gotten out of. Would you?
We use Baskerville.
Okay.
Have you used that? It's like a basket style muzzle.
I don't know what brand it is, but I have a basket, just from Amazon, I have a basket muzzle. And
Does it have a third strap?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
And maybe we
It's
didn't
just
like
not tight enough,
put it
or it's
on
the
her.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the other thing is the fit. Okay, because that's people tend to put muzzles too loose and the dog's able to easily slip it off.
Yeah.
But muzzles aren't fit like collars. You know, collars you have the 2-finger rule. With muzzles, it's super snug, where it's like on the back of
Oh,
the
yeah,
skull.
and I don't think we can do
Yeah.
that.
So, but what we would do first is, regardless if you work with me or another trainer, you want a muzzle condition, okay? And we use food for that. So if the dog's already adverse to the muzzle, I use their actual kibble. I don't use treats or anything. And I remove all excess treats, all the good stuff, and it's simply her kibble in the muzzle. So she's gonna wanna put her face in there because it's her home, the only way she's gonna eat the food. Okay, and I have a video on this that we can send you,
Okay.
because that's a whole other thing on its own. But you would just start that process on your own. Okay? So as we progress, when we get to the point of, okay, because me, I don't need the muzzle. I have my suit, I have my sleeve, I can do all this, no problem. Is, let's say 5 weeks in, it's like, okay, now you're ready, you can have people touch her now. Is you've already done 5 weeks of muzzle conditioning. Is it's easier. Okay, what a lot of people do is they hold off on the muzzle because they either don't like the idea, or two, they just put it to the end thinking it's not going to be a big problem. And then they need the muzzle, and all of a sudden, like, oh man, Jesse, now the dog's fighting the muzzle, and I'm like, it could take weeks to months to condition that. So I always people right off the bat, go home and start that process. Okay, even if it's not the correct muzzle, just start it because it's a muzzle. It's going to be on the face until we can get the correct one. Okay, so the way I would work with this case, like what determines cost length of time, is the behavior and how much control you want. The way I approach things is I look at this case and I go, okay, if all you care about is just kind of opening her up and getting her to be as social as possible, getting her to relax more and all that stuff, when guests coming over and all that, there's that, and then there's like what you're gonna need in order for that to happen. The most important command in all of this is the heel. Okay, teaching her how to walk at your hip with no tension, no matter the environment. Okay, e-collar is a stressor. Walking alleviates stress. When dogs feel e-collar, they want to move. You'll see most likely they want to move away. They typically want a flight response. Heel is a moving behavior, so it allows the dog to take the pressure and move, which it kind of alleviates or meets that need to move, but then also teach them what to do. Okay, it's teaching her how it turns on and how it turns off, because she's not meant to have her muscle contracted. So we're trying to teach her the language of the collar. So that's usually 2 weeks or 2 classes. Once we get that done, jumping into class 3, now we're going to do the touch approach. Okay, so and Doug's videos are a good kind of example, albeit an extreme. But for them, because he was such an extreme case, I started it day 1. Because I was like, if I wait for class 3, we're not going to be there until class 7. So I was going to start this class 1, so now by class 4, I'm already kind of closing the gap on things, right? For a dog like her, because she's not like him, we might find on class 3, I'll go to pet her, and nothing happens. Because now she's learned how to handle stress because of the collar. It indirectly can address the issue.
Sure.
Okay? So, and then there's no exact way it's going to work. I've done this so many times that I have an idea. So it's kind of like play it by ear. But for sure, 2 classes are going to be on the heel. Come back class 3, we do the touch. What did heel fix? Does it help her take the pressure without panicking? Does she panic but not as much? You know, does she recover quickly? If we correct her, does she just automatically stop and just go, okay, go for it, right? I'm not sure. We figured that out. That's class 3. I do a little bit of touch. We'll do some more pressure exercises through obedience. Come back class 4, revisit the touch. What did she retain from the previous class? okay? And then once we get to a point where I feel like she's, receptive to the touch. Because I'm trying to get rid of all the other stuff. So when you visit that with your guest or with your relatives or your friends, they're not going to pet her and all of a sudden she's got lunges at them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm trying to knock that all out the way, so that this way when you go to expand our social bubble, it's not going to dissuade your guests, of course, from wanting to help you, but also it's not going to like discourage you from like, oh crap, like this was bad. And it can happen, like it's part of the process, and that's why the muzzle is there, because we would simply correct and then continue with the process.
Right.
But for the average dog owner, they tend to like feel bad, or they don't like that the dog was under stress.
Yeah.
But it's just part of the process.
Sure.
Okay. The next thing would just be general control. Obedience-wise, the only command you need for this behavior is technically the heel. Okay. Sit down, stay, place, and come, or whatever are all superficial. If your main goal is simply just the behavior stuff.
Yeah.
Now, if you're like, hey, we like to take her out for a walk, and we want to take her off leash and know that she's going to come and not run away, and we want to take her to restaurants where she's not all over the place because she's anxious and we want her to just sit still, then they go, okay, we need more stuff.
I think just her being like semi-okay in her home, I think we would be delighted with that. She's so, and maybe this is a bad sign, or clearly a sign that she has behavior issues, but we play chuck it with her at the park, and she is so ball obsessed and then so obsessed with us, like she would never run anywhere.
Sure.
Yeah. So and maybe it's probably bad that we take her off leash and play it's the only way to get her energy out of her, really. But yeah, I think.
I don't care.
We usually take her to a field by herself.
I am super non-judgmental. I don't care. It sounds to me like she's got a lot of good ball drive, and I know what you're talking about, where she's like, as long as you got that ball, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine.
It's usually because we'll find an area where there's kind of her track and there's no one there. Like we don't see that there's going to be any interference with other dogs come through her path. It's when a dog will come up and wants to be social, or comes towards her, or charges her, maybe in a playful way. She's just like, she wants them to go away, and she will get aggressive, and she will like bark, and if they go away, that's fine, and she'll keep on playing with the ball. But it's like, that's about as most as what we'll see.
Yeah, and that's normal in the dog world. In our world, it's not the greatest, because like let's say a dog ran into your personal space while you're playing fetch, and for her she's like, hey, this is our space, we were here first, and she were to nip or bite at them to correct them. All she's doing is, hey, get out of our space, right? Get out of our space, we don't have a problem. But then because that dog belongs to somebody, that's where things get weird, right? But because I look at things from a dog's perspective, right? In our world, we make things complicated. This gray area, so like someone's dog bit someone through the fence, and I was like, it sucks because legally they're liable, right? There's leash laws, and even though it's on their property, because they're like, Jesse, was on my property, and I still, they have a charge. I'm like, yeah, because there's leash laws, even on your own property. If your dog is off leash and they bite someone, even if they slip their hand over the fence or whatever, you're held liable. Yeah. However, in the dog world, that's security. Right? They're like, hey, you're encroaching on our territory. I'm going to protect our territory. Back off. I had somebody get sued for $100,000 and lose his home insurance because his dog bit his neighbor, because his neighbor jumped the fence to get to another neighbor's yard, and the dog bit him on the ass, and he sued him. He lost for $100,000 and lost his home insurance. And he's like, what the hell? He's like, it's my property. Like, why? I'm like, it's just how the way the laws work. The human laws don't work the way we would think they would, and in dogs, because they're primal. So, in terms of time, then, if your concern is really just the behavioral stuff, I'd probably just put you in 6 classes. Okay. 1 day a week for an hour, 2 on the heel. Make sure we get that down pack that has to happen, and then by class 3, we're going to jump into the touch stuff. Okay, and then see where she's at. We'll revisit the touch exercise and everything like that, and see how that's going. And then by class 4, if that's going well, we would want the muzzle, and then I would show you how to do controlled contacts with socializing her with guests, okay, depending where she kind of picks up from. We'll need a class in terms of people coming over, because that's its own thing, okay, where she becomes territorial, and it's not so much about obedience as it is telling her, like, hey, thanks for letting me know, but you need to chill and relax, because when the knock happens and she becomes territorial, it's literally, she can't help it. It's just a trigger, okay? But what can happen is when you have a nervous dog, they get territorial, they're stressed, nervousness kicks in, so they don't ever fully settle. And which is why when they come in and then like she relaxes and then an hour later someone stands up randomly, she triggers, because she never completely settled, okay? The other thing would be, or the remaining class would be, in order for us to break the habit of the nervous barking, is we have stimulus response. So it's stimulus response correction. Okay, so we have to start breaking a habit. So what happens is somebody jumps up, she barks, e-collar happens, okay, and then she stops barking. And we got to keep repeating that pattern, and what you'll see is someone's going to jump up, she's going to think about it, but then retract, and then think, am I going to get hit with the collar? Because she's anticipating the correction, but if she didn't bark, we do nothing. So then she starts to assess, like, oh, you can move, and I don't have to bark. And if I don't bark, nothing happens. But if I do bark, a correction happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then we have to create new habits. Now that's going to be the hardest part, because that takes time.
Sure.
Okay, so when you set a dog up, like they learn, like they're like, okay, this is a setup, like with humans, right? And Louis like, oh, this looks like a setup. Same thing for dogs. Is organic situations obviously have to happen organically, that they're tough to set up. So what I do is I tell you, like, okay, you know, you're gonna start kind of just living your life normally, having people come over and stuff and everything like that, and then tell your guests like when they're gonna get up to let you know so that you're ready to correct her. And you can even have her muzzled during this time, so in case they get up and like they forget and she attempts something, she's muzzled. Nothing's gonna happen. So it allows you to correct her, but dogs technically have to perform behavior and be corrected in order to learn not to do it.
Sure.
Okay, because again, we can't communicate her and tell her like, hey, if someone gets up, please don't try to nip them, right? She has to attempt it and then be nipped for the behavior or bit for the behavior itself. And she goes, oh, that's not an option. I had to figure out a different way of dealing with this, okay? Questions on any of that?
No, I mean, I think that makes sense. I think the closest, maybe we're not the closest though, but I think we used to do too bad with her, which was we would put her in the bathroom in the dark for about 30 seconds, or was it a minute maybe?
A minute.
When she would do something that was, she would go out with a cat. That was the one thing we were trying to get her to stop doing that. And it worked. Like she would, it would get to the point where I would almost make the sound of saying the word do that. And she would look at me with this look of like,
Oh shit.
pathetic, and then she wouldn't do it because she knew that she didn't want to be in that unhappy state or in whatever state she was feeling. That was just being away from us in the dark in the bathroom. So I guess that makes sense. That just with correcting, maybe, or at least preventing.
Yeah.
behavior.
So the goal here is to get her, and realistically speaking, I only care about people coming into the home. It's unrealistic to expect her to like everybody, including random strangers on the street.
Yeah, and we
Which-
don't have unrealistic expectations. We're hoping, you know, like, just basically no one's been able to help us today, you know, and just anything to help us manage this, and we don't expect her to be like a different dog at the end of this. We love her and we're committed to this. You know, just any additional tools to help us kind of, and help her, because she's clearly in distress, right? So.
When it comes to the collar, the reason why I do remotes is because, again, non-confrontational, not a lot of technical skill, very straightforward. Also off-leash reliability in the sense that, you know, you're not always going to have a leash on her. So like if you're across the room and you see her eyeballing someone, like she's thinking about it, boom, you're still correct. Now, one of the most common questions I get is, when does the e-collar go away? In my book, it doesn't when you need it, okay? So I don't know how this is gonna work out. It's possible that you can get to a point where she wouldn't need it within the home, but I don't know, okay? So you guys drive?
Yeah.
You go to the expressway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you go the speed limit?
No. I mean, sometimes.
Most people don't go the speed limit. But you see a squad car, what happens? Slow down. Because of threat of consequence. Okay? So that's what the e-collar is. It's a cop on the collar. Because people very common ask like, well, if the dog's well trained, or or the dog should learn to be a good dog. And I'm like, but dogs don't do things like humans. We're proactive. Like you can hire a trainer and it'd be a failure if you hire another one. And you hire another one, you go to a veterinary behaviorist. Like you can just proactively make decisions because like we want to fix this problem. Dogs don't do that. Okay, she's reactive. She's going to respond to what's going on within the environment. So once she's conditioned to recognize the collars, when the collar's on, she's great, no problem, not giving into nervous responses, right? And then when you remove it, she's going to push things because she knows, hey, you don't have the consequence. Okay. Now, with behavior cases, this is where things get kind of tricky. In some cases, the owner might have it when the guest knocks, because that's always the triggering stimuli. We settle the dog, and then we've done this so many times, and you've exposed her so many times that it's possible that it's just on when that knock happened, and then 15 minutes later you take it off, and she's a great dog. Okay. In other cases, the client might need it for the entire time someone is over. In other cases, the client can get the dog over everything and they don't need the collar. That's super rare though. Okay, it's super, super rare. The most common one is the one in the middle, where it's like, okay, I have the collar on the first 15 minutes, and then once she's relaxed, once everybody's here and stuff, and she already has warmed up to everybody, and we've got her over that kind of social bubble thing, we can remove it. Okay. Outside on walks, the reason why the heel is so important is because it allows you to practice discipline on a regular basis.
Sure.
Because most people tend to walk their dogs at least 3 times a day. Because she has to have a reminder, like, hey, this is a thing. Like consequences are a thing. Like rules are in play. Because imagine for humans, imagine if rules just disappeared one day. Imagine if laws just disappeared, right? Those traffic lights disappeared.
Yeah.
It would be chaos.
It would.
Yep. So it's the same thing for your dog here. Okay, the rules are always in effect. And then how much work you put into it, how often do people come over, there's a lot of variables there. So like I had one of my first aggression cases was the fear aggression case, and they were super social people. They had like people over 3 to 4 times a week. And they got their dog over real fast because it was just constant exposure. And I get other couples that have like people over like once a month. And I'll tell them like, it's gonna be a process because unless you go out of your way to have people come over, probably gonna take a bit of time, right?
Well, we can definitely, if it will help the process, we basically stopped having people over because we lived in like a tiny condo in San Francisco, and it was like her den, and she wouldn't allow anybody in there, so we either took her to like, board for the night or whatever. Like we stopped having people over because she wouldn't allow it, or
Sure.
she bid them.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is go back to a state of normalcy.
Yeah.
Okay, but when it comes to the collar, that's the most common thing that people ask. And it's nothing good or bad, it is what it is. It's just opportunistic behavior. When it's not on, she doesn't have to behave herself, then why should she? Okay? But it's not that you're always having to use it. It's just the presence of it puts her in a different state. Okay? And in regards to what the technology is, it's just a muscle contraction. It's a miniaturized TENS unit. They use the technology on humans. I'm not sure if you guys have ever had the electrodes or anything like that. A physical therapist, a chiropractor.
I've had it at some point, yeah.
The stim.
It just contracts your muscle.
Correct.
It's really weird.
Yeah, it's the same technology that they use on humans, and that electricity running through your dog's body. It's fully waterproof, both the transmitter and the receiver. It's not going to like burn your dog's skin or anything like that because again, it's not electricity. Okay, it's just a muscle contraction. Questions?
So I do have a couple questions. So because you also offer daycare and boarding, right? Would she get any additional training, or is it she's just in a safe place that knows how to control her when she's here?
Oh, well, we would socialize her and stuff.
Okay.
So the daycare day here, if we've not trained the dog, if they're social, they get to play and socialize. They do treadmill time. And they get time to decompress in the kennel. So it's not constant, like all day play. Like right now, I think my handler might be out, but on lunch. But we have like 11 dogs boarding right now back there. So, if they're playing, we keep it chill. We don't allow dogs to escalate or anything like that. If the dog has done training with us, we reinforce any training. So like every time they would walk her to go potty and stuff, because we take the dogs outside, they would reinforce the heel.
Okay.
They would most likely teach her stationary control, which is go here and don't move for a period of time, because that's mental exercise. Because there's a lot of stuff going on, so she'd be on the bed like this, and there's dogs being trained, there's dogs on a treadmill, there's dogs playing, there's puppies playing behind them, there's all that stuff going on, and they're just sitting there chilling, right? And then she would also do treadmill time as well as the decompression time in the kennel. Okay, so they have more activity, so it's kind of broken up, so that the dogs go home calm and not like wired because of constant overstimulation. And then yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. And the boarding, so they stay in individual kennels when they're, okay.
Yeah. We use standard wire kennels. We don't have anything fancy. I'm only here for another year and a half because it's a 3-year lease. And then ideally I'm gonna move to a different facility that would be my long-term place.
Okay.
But there's someone on premise 24/7.
Okay.
So according to Chicago law, if dogs are boarded overnight, they either have to have a fire alarm system that goes directly to the nearest fire department. In case there's a fire and they come, it lets them know immediately. Or if they don't have a fire alarm system set up, we have someone on premise 24/7, which is what I have set up here.
Okay.
Other questions?
The kennel thing, I think we tried it once at this place called WAG for just boarding. And it was really early on, and then I think we switched to a place that wasn't just open. It was just open. Like they would have beds all over the place in different
Oh, sure,
places.
like a free, yeah.
Yeah.
And so she's done that. She did well with that. So
She did not do well with the kennel, but
and she has a kennel at home, and she loves it. Like she'll go and sleep in it. That's her place. So I don't know. I don't know I don't think she's ever experienced it other than that one time. That's all.
Sure. So if you brought her, right, and she's starting training, whatever, all the kennels are actually out on the floor. All the daycare kennels. So all the daycare dogs are on the floor regardless if they're in a kennel or whatever. And if you go to my Instagram, it's a few weeks back, but I posted a video of like dogs training, dogs playing, and like it's just like a standard day of what daycare looks like. So she wouldn't be like secluded. Like dogs are on the floor and they're just chill while everything is going on, so they're not overwhelmed with stress. Because if you go into other kennels, like it's usually loud, there's a lot of barking and stuff like that, because it's like kind of like a free-for-all, and that's actually a stressful environment. So here we keep it quiet. We don't allow dogs to get overly anxious or anything like that. We do correct them. So like let's say we put her in the kennel and she was acting up because she was stressed, we would correct her, but eventually she would learn how to just like be here and coexist and not feel like she has to be overwhelmed and anxious and stuff. Okay? Any questions?
I don't think so, none that I can think of. Yeah.
No, I think this was kind of what I expected. Thank you for explaining everything.
Yeah, no worries. So if you want to get like a visual, Doug is a good case to watch. He's of course an extreme case. So, but it kind of gives you an idea of how things work. And then we'll get in contact with you. She's overwhelmed with like a lot of consultation requests and everything like that. So
yeah.
a little bit of a turnaround time, it's okay. Plus it might be a 2 to 4 week wait to get in with me. According to what your availability is like, so if you have like daytime availability, you're more likely to get in sooner.
Sure.
Whereas if it's just evenings and weekends, like those are the most popular times, and those take the longest to like get in on.
There could be possibilities.
Do you ever do like early morning sessions? Because we're working on Pacific time still, so like our mornings are actually pretty free.
So in the mornings I do the transports for daycare.
Oh, okay.
So I don't, my training day doesn't start till 10 a.m. because that's typically how long it'll take me to do all the transports. So yeah, it just depends. So she'd figure all that stuff out.
Okay.
Yeah.
We work with Maria.
So she'd answer any questions. She'd send you the make and model of the car we'd recommend, which, how much does she weigh?
She's like
46.
46, okay. So you have a couple of options. The Dogtra 2300, the Dogtra Black Edition. One is for 70 pounds and under, one is for 70 pounds and over. The only reason why I recommend the other one is just because if a dog was in the panic, like with Doug, how it took us 2 minutes before we actually got him to settle, is you have to account for state of mind, if the dog is being aggressive, the size of the dog, the thickness of the coat. There's a lot of variables in play. So having a higher powered collar, I'm not worried about anything. Like we have the highest powered collar, we're gonna get it done, right? And in case of an emergency, but I think you'd also be fine with the 2300 from what I saw earlier. She's not like crazy. She's, like I said, like moderate level of nervousness.
It makes me, I know like you see these cases all the time, but to us, she's extreme. So to hear you say that like she's not like the worst you've ever seen is really reassuring, actually.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I mean, I
it
get
gives
that.
us hope.
Yeah, no, I get that. You guys, you know, you wouldn't be the first person to feel like that, you know, because most people don't know what they're doing. Like most trainers would never touch your dog. They would just say, "Oh my God, your dog is crazy," right? You're acting from a distance, but you don't know until you actually touch the dog. I
Yeah.
touched her. That's what tells us what she's about. And she very, you know, very small second, you know, 2 seconds of like very mild, like, hey, back away. A lot of it was just like grumbling and barking and panic, you know. So, and then from what I've seen, again, just moderate. So, other than that, nothing out the ordinary for me. You know, this is typical nervous dog,
Okay.
pretty standard to her personality type. Okay?
Okay.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Cool. So if you need anything else, you let us know. Otherwise, I'll help you guys out.
Okay.
And she might be a little edgy of me just because I put pressure on her, which is okay.